Derek Dingle, Chief Content Officer for Black Enterprise. Welcome to this all-new episode of Boardroom Chats hosted by Nationwide. In this edition, we will discuss, among other topics, what it takes to gain and retain high-powered board positions, as well as how Black representation brings value to corporate governance. As such, I am extremely fortunate to have as today's guest a corporate veteran who has used his strategic and technical prowess to become a powerhouse in the C-suite and boardroom. Alfred Zollar has held numerous senior leadership roles within the tech field, including his groundbreaking tenure at IBM for more than 34 years, where he served in such roles as General Manager of IBM's Network Computing Software Division, President and CEO of its Lotus Development Corp, and General Manager of IBM Tivoli Software, a global multi-million-dollar business within IBM's software division. He retired from IBM in 2011 and has served as an executive advisor and executive partner for the private equity firm Cirrus Capital Group, LLC. He's a longtime corporate board member, found among the ranks of the Black Enterprise Registry of Corporate Directors. He has also served on the boards of Nasdaq, Bank of New York Mellon, and IBM. He is here today to share his journey and views on the importance of board service. Al, thank you for joining us for Boardroom Chats. There's an opportunity to share with our audience what it takes to ascend to the boardroom and then also be effective in corporate governance. What I'd like to do before we talk about your board service and the dynamics of corporate governance, I want to get you to frame a bit of your journey, especially in the tech field. The first I'd like to know, and we haven't had an opportunity to fully explore this, what drove you to engage in tech? And then why did you decide to plant your flag in that field as a career? What were the driving factors?
Well, Derek, first off, let me thank you for the opportunity to address this audience. It's really a pleasure for me, and I greatly appreciate it. So I'll give you the short version because there's a long version. I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri, and left there when I was in the 10th grade, finished high school in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I had a math teacher who really inspired me. And so that pushed me really into math, and I discovered computers when I went to the University of California, San Diego, and decided that that was really the area that intrigued me. It's what I wanted to work on. So when I graduated, I got my master's degree in applied mathematics. By the way, the early math I studied back then involved things called neural networks, which are fundamental to AI today. So we could talk about that. But, it was my access to the computing systems that they had there at the time. These were old mainframes. This was the 1970s. But that initial, surge or rush of being able to code and create algorithms was kind of what hooked me. And so I was fortunate to have IBM be the place where I landed. It actually happened quite by accident because I was interviewing for an actuarial job because I couldn't find jobs in tech because I knew Burroughs systems, not IBM systems. But I was interviewing for an actuarial job, and they wanted me to move to New York. I wasn't ready for that, and literally as I'm walking out of the door of the recruiter's office, she says, "Well, looking at your resume, it looks like you have some interest in programming. IBM's on the 3rd floor, and I hear they're hiring." So I walked upstairs, dropped my resume, took their tests, got hired, and 34 years later, I walked out the door. So just really been fortunate to have had the opportunities that I've had.
That was by Kismet, joining IBM. How did you entered IBM by happenstance, but in terms of moving up within IBM and the assignments that you gained at IBM, was that an intentional part of your journey, or was that also, opportunities that came up to you and you decided to pounce on them as they presented themselves?
Yeah, Derek, from where I came from, I really didn't understand what IBM was. I knew they made computers. That's pretty much all I knew. And I was just fortunate to be hired at a time by a great company who was interested in investing in the future of the people that they brought on. So at the time, IBM would hire people with aptitude. That's what their screening test was all about, and would take you through all of the training that you needed to be successful. So the first phase of my IBM career was was a customer-facing roles. First 9 years were in roles helping customers implement the IBM technologies of the day, the IBM mainframes, big networks, printing systems, those kinds of things. And I made my way up to middle management in that first phase. And again, I didn't have a plan. I just figured if I worked hard, and I was fortunate to have great mentors and sponsors and bosses that noticed my contributions, and they kept asking me to do new and interesting things. But one thing that I really sort of forced in my careers, I enjoyed, I was working with customers. They wanted me to move more towards sales roles with customers. And I wanted to move closer to the technology. And so I was able to have some mentorship and sponsorship that helped me navigate a path toward the product side of IBM's business. That's where I spent the latter 25 years of my career. And that's where I got opportunities to run some of the iconic software brands that IBM was known for back then, including a relational database called DB2, including Lotus software, which had its day, and Tivoli software, which had its day. So again, I feel in many ways that I've just been almost like Forrest Gump. I stumble into these opportunities and great things happen. And of course, the most interesting thing in terms of the past few years was being invited to join the IBM board. So it's just been an incredible trip for me, round trip, and now that I'm a board member.
Yeah. So once you got in the organization, did you anticipate this was going to be a 34-year journey? Yeah.
Oh no. Oh no. In fact, I've been quoted with this statement that I'm about to make, and it certainly became a fundamental part of my belief system. I take every job like it's the last job I'm going to have. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what was next, and it was really through the mentors and sponsors who helped me understand that I had the potential to do something more. And so every now and then, after a few years in a job, somebody would say, "Al, what about this?" Cool. And I was known for being willing and able to take on challenges that some others shied away for. That's a lesson for a lot of us, especially folks that look like you and I, because sometimes you'll say, "Well, they're just giving it to me because of who I am," and those can be opportunities to excel. And I took every opportunity they threw at me and tried to make it better and help create value for the company.
What's fascinating, you talked about serving on IBM's board. As you look at all your vast experiences, and boardroom chats is so much about corporate governance and how particularly African Americans can gain entree to that experience. What was your first corporate board? When did you decide that joining a corporate board was going to be essential to you getting to the next stage in your career?
Again, you'll see this recurring thing. It just sort of came to me as an opportunity. So one thing I learned is, like it or not, sometimes people pay way more attention to the title that you have than the experience that you have. So when I became president and CEO of Lotus, I had a number of incoming requests to be considered for a board. IBM at the time had a policy that only the CEO could serve on a public board. But the division I was running, Lotus at the time, had a number of, let's just say, audit and control issues. And so when the opportunity, sort of sponsored by or enabled by Jim Cash, Dr. James Cash, my good friend, when he came to me with an opportunity to consider Chubb as a public board, I went and they wanted me to serve on the audit committee. I went to IBM and asked for an exception because I argued that my ability to see the control environment, audit environment from a different perspective than the one I had at Lotus might help me in addressing the issues I had at Lotus at the time. And so they agreed to that exception. So, one takeaway is never accept a rule as laid in concrete, because there's always opportunities for exception to a rule when it makes sense. And in that case, it made sense. So Chubb was my first board that I joined in 2001.
So how was the Chubb experience to you as a board member? What did you learn in that experience? What did you discover in terms of being a part of that board that you didn't realize, before you gained board experience?
I think the biggest thing I learned is to discern between governance and management. And, I came in initially thinking, well, here's what you guys need to do, because it's what I would do if I were in your shoes. But, and of course, being able to watch somebody like Jim Cash, who is masterful in the boardroom, was just an incredible opportunity. So learning that difference was important. I also learned that, when you're invited to a board, sometimes, again, people are invited for the titles, but oftentimes it's more than that title. It's the expertise that you bring. And my knowledge around technology was clearly unique in the boardroom. Obviously, people like Jim Cash, Jim knows a lot about technology, but I run technology organizations and built technology teams and studied, the trends in technology, at a operational level. So I was able to bring that insight, and the key takeaway, I think, for anyone thinking about, serving on a public board is know what value you bring, because we all have different lived experiences, and those lived experiences make you who you are. And, finding the right company where that set of experiences is valuable to their governance and oversight is really what it's about.
So in terms of discovering that value, obviously you had the tech chops. What were some of the other attributes that you had that made you effective on that board, and then also want to seek out or be sought out by other boards?
Well, again, I'll go back to the recurring thing. I wasn't thinking about other boards. I took that job like it was the last one I was going to have. I didn't expect to have any more. So what I did was just tried to understand, the business. That one of the things that I do pride myself on is being curious. And I knew nothing about the insurance business. I knew a lot about the software that they used inside the insurance business. But in terms of underwriting claims, the fundamental business processes associated with, property and casualty insurance, didn't know much about it. So it was an opportunity to learn, and then to try to take the fusion of what I knew and what I was learning in a way that offered advice. And I think that's what I try to take into every boardroom that I've had an opportunity to be in.
So, given how you've joined boards, which in some cases, based on what you shared, were experiences that came to you. You said you talked about Jim Cash. That was via contact, but you also gained other experiences just by people knowing you, being in the right place, having that interest. Having said that, how do you advise specifically young African American executives how they should chart their course for board experience? Because is it something that they should be? I know a lot of what happened to you is by happenstance, but should they be more intentional, or how do you guide young professionals on how to seek out board opportunities and then make take advantage of those opportunities?
Yeah, again, I quote the phrase a lot of times, if you want to make God laugh, show him a plan. But what I have learned, especially with this younger generation, who I think because of their knowledge base and opportunity set are far more aware and intentional than I was. And so I found a way that can help them that's very straightforward. It starts with, who are you? What are those lived experiences that would make what you know and what you've been through valuable to a board? Then think about what industry sectors that knowledge and lived experience might be most valuable to. Then there's a very simple thing you can do. Pick a few companies out of that industry sector and go to their website, their investor relations website, look who's on the board, look who's on the nomination and governance committee. Now, here's where I have a break with a lot of my younger folks that I speak to is, the ones who are in their 30s and 40s and trying to be intentional about boards, like, please just be good at the job you are doing for the next 20 years. And, maybe it'll be a little bit less than that, but you need to cross that bridge first. When you get past that bridge, then the advice I'm giving you will be a bit more relevant, because if you've got 20, 15, 20, 30 years of experience, chances are that search for the board members and nom and gov members in the sector you want, you're either going to know people because of the industry context you operated in who are in those roles, or you're going to be 1 degree of separation from them. And so with that knowledge or 1 degree of separation, just reach out and say, please give me some advice on what it takes to be on a board. That does 2 things. First off, because most of us are happy, especially from our community, we're happy to share our experiences the way that you're enabling with this event. But the other thing it does is it makes them aware that, hey, you're interested. And so your name gets in circulation. Next thing you know, you get that invitation. And the thing that happens about boards, I think back when I joined my first one, and I think to this day, once you've got your first one, and if you develop a reputation for being a good board member, then the number of invitations that come your way is likely to accelerate.
So, having said that, what are the misconceptions? One thing that I've gained insight to in terms of having these interviews is that, this board service, this is a real job. This is very intentional. Your mandate is creating shareholder value. It's a lot of reading. It's knowing the company. It's being very intentional in terms of driving the performance of that company. So having said that, when you talk to young professionals and when you talk to professionals in general, what are the misconceptions that they have, or what have you cleared up for them in terms of misconceptions that they may have in terms of board service?
Well, yeah, I think you hit on some of them. Some people think that, you just show up and vote yay or nay. It's way more than that. I think it has to start with a deep curiosity, like I said, about insurance. I didn't know anything about insurance, and it was a great learning experience. The second board I went on was PSEG, energy infrastructure company with an electric utility and nuclear power plants. I didn't know anything about nuclear power plants. And so going into those roles with deep curiosity, again, bringing what uniquely can bring to bear, whether it's a tech or finance or construction or whatever the background you bring. But going into it with a deep curiosity so that you can understand the business, put the context of the business in what you know, and then be of value. So it is work. One, especially in a highly regulated industry like banking, it's not unusual to get 1,000 pages to read. Again, these are PowerPoints, in some cases more dense, Word documents, but it's not unusual to get 1,000 pages to read. And the expectation is that you've read them, consumed them, and are in a position to do what I think is the most important thing for board members. And that is you have to be in a position to both challenge and support management and do both of them with rigor and vigor. And so that's what I try that's the mindset that I try to bring. And that's what I try to tell people the job is. Again, the pay is fine. Some people may think of it as a lifestyle kind of thing, but it is real work. And again, I'm back to my old phrase. I don't expect to have another board assignment, so I treat it like the last one I'm going to have.
Well, having said that, in terms of being a corporate director, as an African-American corporate director, do you feel an obligation, and I'm using that word intentional, to ensure, diversity within the board, to ensure that there's a focus on, African Americans within the corporation, and that they're a part of the team, and that there are opportunities? How do you look at diversity from the lens that you've operated on board?
Great question. A few years ago, I wrote a piece. I called it the Allyship Challenge, New White Men. And the basic premise is that for the past 500 years, the institutions that have made up the Western world have been driven and run by white men. It's only the past 40 or 50 years, again, you can argue how long ago that started, that we really began to see the diversification of boardrooms in the form of gender and racial and ethnic diversity. And so there's been research over this time period that shows a very high correlation between companies that perform well and boards that are diverse. And so based on that research and based on the fact that white men have been overrepresented, I make the argument that, let's follow the research. Let's make sure we have the right kind of diverse lived experiences on our boards. And I think most of the boards I've worked with, generally accept that and believe it. There've been some outliers and exceptions. We won't talk about that. But so the second perspective is as it relates to Black folks. And my view as it relates to Black folks are that, when we're in the room, we have a personal responsibility. I take a personal responsibility to make sure that the opportunity set that the corporation can influence includes us. What do I mean by that? The people that are hired, at all levels of the business, entry through top executive, can be benefited by the presence of people from our talented community. The purchasing that is done by the corporation, can be diversified to people that look like you and I. The philanthropy can also be importantly diversified. So stated another way, if all they're doing is giving to the Met, that helps maybe us on the margins, but I'd rather see them give to one of my favorite charities, Eagle Academy. If all they're doing is purchasing goods from CDW, which is a great tech reseller, I want to break them off something to Worldwide Technology, founded by Dave Stewart, the richest Black man in the United States. I'm sure he and Robert Smith are neck and neck on that. If all they're doing is hiring people who come from the Indian or South Asian diaspora, then they're probably missing some perspectives that come from our rich community. So that's something I believe as a board member, I have a responsibility as a Black man. I believe I have that responsibility to make sure that those things are discussed when appropriate in the boardroom.
Well, what's interesting, the issue that you raised and the dynamic that we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years. In fact, we started our study on our board list around that time. And what we found initially when we developed the board list, that there was a underrepresentation of African Americans on corporate boards, primarily in the tech sector.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then,
for sure.
Yeah, and then we unveiled our list, and we didn't, we wasn't outing any companies for not having Black directors. We just took public information, as Butch would say, and made it more public.
It was a little bit of outing though, because I remember that moment, and there was some a few embarrassed folks, and they should have been.
Okay, I'll be unapologetic about it. What's interesting is there was this drive to diversify the boards in the tech sectors and in companies that didn't have board representation. Then comes in 2020, the George Floyd moment. And then the recruitment and the focus on boards went almost into hyperdrive. Over the last, 5 years, we saw, this increase and this acceleration of recruitment. And now today, we're seeing a deceleration. We're seeing, less activity as it appears in terms of bringing more African Americans on board, and in particular, Black women. From your vantage point, am I looking at this properly in terms of what has been, the dynamics in terms of recruitment and engagement of African Americans on boards? And if so, why are we seeing this process, especially when, the case has been made that diversified boards increase shareholder value, increase profitability, and all the factors that you mentioned?
Well, there's a lot in that question. I'll start with the fact that this is kind of what happens in our country. We take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. We had Reconstruction, then we had Jim Crow. And so in some ways, this is just another version of that, albeit, in a very different context, but it's another version of that. So you're absolutely right. I'm on the board of Nasdaq. We were part of promulgating the board diversity rule, which has now been shut down by the Fifth Circuit Court. And but one of the consequences of that rule is that we indeed saw an acceleration of board diversity among the Nasdaq listed companies, and actually beyond the Nasdaq listed companies. And so that will, again, that's been decided now, and that's that. But the infrastructure that organizations have created to diversify boards, especially as they are entering the public markets, has actually been quite impressive. Goldman Sachs said they wouldn't take a company public if it didn't have a diverse board. And they've got people who I know who are receiving candidates that are quite diverse so that they can help their IPO potential customers transition from what might have been a more limited private company board to a more diverse public company board. Though that infrastructure exists in Morgan Stanley and Nasdaq and probably even more places. We have things like Black women on boards. We have Equinor. We have all these, organizations and infrastructure that have really started the flywheel. And so while there might be some ebbs and flows in terms of actual numbers, I'm more focused on the fact that we have these infrastructures in place. And I actually think in some ways that that portal into, board service for those who've had senior careers, Black folks who've had senior careers, and especially if those careers have involved diverse experiences, maybe in sales and engineering or finance. Well, they actually have a competitive advantage as board members for these pre-IPO companies, because these pre-IPO companies want as many experiences wrapped up into one person as they possibly can get. They want a financial expert who can serve or chair an audit committee. They want somebody who can deal with cybersecurity. And many of the people I mentor around board service bring a wide swath of those kind of experiences to potential board service. So I think if we, kind of open our eyes up and don't just focus on the Fortune 100 or 500, then the opportunity to serve on these companies that are entering into the public markets is one where, our folks can actually have a competitive advantage.
So you feel that we should broaden the field of companies in terms of presenting these opportunities, as opposed to just focusing on for our list, we look at the S&P 500 and going beyond that in terms of finding candidates and talents and positioning them for future board positions.
Yeah, look at the pre-IPO pipelines, because again, if you were, before Uber came to the public markets, they probably didn't have a lot of board diversity. Well, the bankers and the exchange venues like Nasdaq can help them diversify, and we are helping them diversify. Not Uber specifically. I don't know the situation there, but the companies that are in our IPO pipeline, we help diversify. Morgan Stanley and Goldman, two big clash of the titans when they're trying to bring companies forward to the public markets. Well, one competitive aspect they have is that they want to be able to say, well, I can diversify your board better than the other guy can. And so, we need to be in there with those folks, helping them to know about the incredible sets of folks. I mean, a good friend started a cybersecurity company, and, he's a bad dude. And, some of these folks didn't know about him. So again, these are the kinds of things, that's the kind of infrastructure that, irrespective of the noise that's in the current environment, we need to leverage to make sure that we get the representation that we should have.
So as you talk about broadening the pipeline, how does that play out in terms of corporate leadership? There's been a real challenge, and I know you've been engaged with the Executive Leadership Council and what have you, but a real challenge in terms of having more African-American CEOs of public companies, real challenges in terms of having African-American leadership in terms of positions on boards as chairs or lead directors. As you look at the pipeline broadening through this pre-IPO scenario, how does that leadership scenario change, or how do we drive that leadership scenario so that we see more a larger African-American presence?
Well, that's another good question, Derek. And my fundamental belief is that, to get to any CEO position, it's a difficult path. To get to a C-suite is a difficult path. And the numbers are small on any given company. So looking at any given company, we can challenge ourselves to, diversify the management teams there. But we need something, again, even though my life was sort of non-intentional, I do believe that there are more things that we can do to be intentional that will achieve the kind of outcomes we're looking for. And to me, it starts with entrepreneurship and capital formation. I'm fortunate to be an investor in a number of venture capital firms. And I seek to invest in those that are particularly mindful of broadening access to opportunity. And, the young folks, brothers and sisters that I see that have an entrepreneurial spirit and capability and are CEOs, maybe of their startup, and will be senior executives and CEOs of bigger companies as I project what they're doing 20 years down the line. It's encouraging to me. Not enough, never enough, but it's there. And so what I think we all need to do is to make sure that we're doing our part to develop and accelerate that. And again, I could give you, story after story of some of these young entrepreneurs who are rising. And every now and then, one of them shows up as a not so young entrepreneur, like a Robert Smith or Dave Stewart, but who have blazed that trail that is available to us if we can focus on getting opportunity, access to capital, all those things that create those kind of positions. So this is a long game in my view. It's not a short game.
Yeah, what really amazes me though is that roughly 40 years ago, Black enterprise, discovered Ken Chenault. We, made his presence known as a coming mover and shaker in corporate America, CEO, and others, whether you talk about Dick Parsons, what have you. And now 40 years later, you have his and others like you, your proteges, your talent that you've identified, and it seems like it would be a no-brainer to have that talent infused within corporate governance or within, senior management, just because it's valuable to have that talent to drive the future of those corporations. And the word that Rod Atkins used, and I'm going to use it here, is for the vitality of those companies, for the innovation within those companies, to grow those companies further. And what really challenges me is why naturally you just wouldn't see that, because it just makes great business sense to tap that talent.
Well, there are probably a lot of reasons for it, but I think any company, when they're thinking about diversity, if from the top of the company, they don't have the fundamental belief that every group of people has a lot to bring to the table for that corporation. Again, I'm talking diversity writ large, Black, Asian, Latino, Native American. Every group of people has a unique set of lived experience that can bring value to the company. I think there are some boards and C-suites that don't fundamentally believe that. They might give it lip service, but I think there are some that don't fundamentally believe that. And so in kind of this moment we're in, this anti-DEI moment, you're seeing those who really didn't believe retreat. What you're seeing from those who did believe is saying, okay, we don't need to get sued, so we're not maybe going to be as vocal about things as we were, but we're going to keep doing the work. And so that's what I think is happening, at least from my very small purview into the world. But again, this is a long game. This is not something you don't get a Ken Chenault overnight. You don't get a Ken Frazier overnight. You don't get a Marvin Ellison overnight. They spend years, decades developing a set of experiences that makes boards say that's the guy or that's the gal in the case of T. Duckett at TIAA. So it takes a while. We just got to keep at it.
How do you apply technology new technology to corporate governance to make it more effective, more efficient, to look at the diversity equation? You who have spent your career in this space, how does technology aid the process of, creating shareholder value and creating more dynamic companies and help board members drive that process or advise in that process, rather.
Yeah, well, again, governance and management, it's really a sort of advisory role. But I love technology. I've been fortunate to live through this amazing period of technology. Obviously, AI is the thing that is on a lot of people's minds. That we're not talking as much about quantum computing yet, but we will be. So the things that are really good, transforming, everything. And the way I encourage boards to think about technology now across every dimension of business endeavor is that increasingly the best economics are going to those businesses that understand how to become a platform and how to use platforms. So what I mean by that, if you think about, let's take Nasdaq. Nasdaq has a liquidity platform called the Nasdaq Exchanges that has a tremendous ability to create economic progress for anybody, but that successful Black or brown entrepreneur who finds an opportunity to go public, and they now have this big liquidity event on Nasdaq. That happens because of a powerful platform. So businesses increasingly need to think about what are the platforms that allow them to create value. And we're living at a moment where the ability to create flexible, agile platforms, again, I'll bring the example of Uber to bear. Uber didn't make location services. They just consumed the location services that allow them to say, oh, Derek's here, car's here, we'll match them up. They didn't create the payment services that allow them to take credit card payments. They just began to consume those services. So they've created a platform that creates economic value. Just had an Uber ride over here from today, talking with the brother who was driving the car. He's got a business that he runs that feeds his family because of that platform. So now let's bring it to diversity. It's a company called Equilard you might know about. My good friend Dave Chun that runs that company has created a platform that has more knowledge about board ready people writ large, but especially about diverse board ready people. So that platform needs, if a company's not using that platform, I'll ask them, have you heard of it? A lot of times they say no. I say, well, go take a look at it. You'll see more board ready, diverse people in that platform than you probably will see in other places. So that's a perspective I bring. And of course, AI has the ability to make these platforms even more valuable, even more effective. And that's the period we're going to live through here in the next few years.
So as you looked at AI technology, what other future trends do you see that will impact the recruitment of board-ready individuals, professionals, as well as help them become more effective in the boardroom?
Well, AI is a great assistant. So I treat AI as my curiosity assistant for all my boards, because any board, it's likely that you're going to run into things that you didn't know about and you need to learn about. Well, you could wait for the board meeting and ask that question at the company, or you could ask, your AI assistant. Now you got to be careful with that, because you can't ask it about stuff that is, material, non-public information, confidential information. But when you have general concepts like, what does this order type mean on the Nasdaq exchange? I can get a really good AI tutorial so that when I come to the board meeting, I'm more prepared. So that's my first use case as a board member, is that. Now, we're companies like Nasdaq provide board portals. So what we're going to see is a range of AI technologies that summarize the information that board members are consuming. And so that wave is yet ahead of us. And I'm looking forward to Nasdaq's delivery and giving us some competitive advantage over our competition in that space.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, Al. your take on diversity, your take on technology, and future leadership. I just really enjoyed this conversation, and it was fascinating. I just wanted to end our conversation for you to share your outlook, related to corporate America, its future from your vantage point, and new developments that you feel need to be that need to happen to drive corporate America forward and to make it more impactful.
I'm overall optimistic. Again, I think we have a lot of turmoil that is swirling around us, but I do think that if I think about organizations like the Black Economic Alliance that Charles Phillips and Dr. Tony Coles have pioneered, the mantra that we talk about there is work, wages, and wealth. And I do think we're in a moment, again, I'm not going to make political commentary, but, the focus on great work, higher wages, family sustaining wages, and helping people understand what it really means to create wealth. In the past, our community thought wealth creation was all about owning real estate, owning your home, and maybe some rental properties. That's good, but that's not where real wealth creation comes from. It comes from having, growth in a diverse set of assets that, have uncorrelated risk. And so that mantra, I think, will continue to build. And I think we'll have better companies for it. We'll have better society for it. But it's as the old folks used to say, all trees don't grow straight to heaven. And there may be some turmoil ahead of us, but I'm overall optimistic. And that optimism really comes from the fact that we're just at the beginning of some of these transformative technology waves, which have risk, but I do think that we're in a position to have companies manage those risks in a way that create more good than not.
Yeah, and the driver of all that will be seeking out talent, and as I believe, and based on the comments you made, and it requires diverse talent, because you have to have diverse talent to have those lived experiences that you talked about, and to have those different perspectives in order to drive business forward.
Couldn't agree more.
So Al, thank you for joining us for this edition of Boardroom Chats, hosted by Nationwide. Your insights and your knowledge was vastly important to what we're seeking to achieve in terms of driving the future of corporate governance.
Well, Derek, thank you for doing what you do.